Last year, over 150 young gymnasts stood united against their perpetrator, Dr. Larry Nassar. After days of testimony, Judge Rosemarie Aquilina made headlines for her direct statements to the man who had gotten away with his crimes for decades.
The judge, unswayed, admonished Nassar in court Thursday.
You may find it harsh, but you are here listening. But nothing is as harsh as what your victims endured for thousands of hours at your hands. Collectively, you spent thousands of hours perpetrating criminal sexual conduct on minors, spending 4 or 5 days listening to them is significantly minor considering the hours of pleasure you had at their expense and ruining their lives.
Since then, Judge Aquilina has made it her mission to give voices to survivors and has become a pillar of strength for the Me Too movement. Please welcome Judge Rosemarie Aquilina to Great Day Houston.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
We know where you are. I want to know where you came from. Were you that little girl who was always feisty, that one that wouldn't sit down in the face of adversity?
Yes, no is, for my whole life, no is what's brought me to action. I want to know why. I want to know if something's going on, why do the boys get to do it and not me? And I make it my mission to make sure that everyone gets a seat at the table, that everyone gets to play with the toys, that everyone has a voice, and that's me included, and it starts with me. Action starts with me.
Yeah. When you were a little girl, complete this phrase: when I grow up, I want to be.
When I grow up, I want to be someone who made a difference for my children and all of our children.
Yeah. A lot of times as young girls, we didn't see ourselves as lawyers, let alone as judges. But you had that, again, that feistiness in you to begin with, and your dad kind of instilled some of that in you.
My dad's a doctor, and I wanted to be a writer, which I am. I'm a published author, but it took me years. And when I said I was going to college for that, he said, well, how will you support yourself? And I looked at him and said, fine, I'll be a lawyer. And I did that because doctors hate lawyers overall. and it served me well, but it was me having my voice and saying, you're not going to control me. Yeah. I have control over my destiny. And it's been that way for my whole life.
There were times when you faced the sexual harassment, and you've seen that,
yes.
And you knew that you were being put in a certain place because you were a woman. What were some of those examples?
One, and I served 20 years in the military and loved it, and once I wore the uniform, I was treated equal. But prior to that, I was the first female who had applied for and been accepted to be a JAG officer in Michigan.
You didn't know that at the time?
I did not know that, and my application sat and sat and sat, and I finally thought, what is going on here? And I knew it was completed. So I put on my tightest jeans and my cowboy boots, which I always wear, and a reasonable top, and so they cannot.
I'm going to stop you right there, because some people will say, you put on your tight jeans. So what are you doing there in front of those men when you put on your tightest jeans?
For me, it was not a sign of take me now. It was a sign of two can play at your game and I'm going to win. It was my sign of power.
Yeah, no matter what you're wearing, that doesn't define what you are.
Right. So I showed up and I volunteered, and I made sure that I ended up in the same place where the general has coffee, and had a little conversation with them and told them I was volunteering. And then by the time I went up to the second floor, he was on the phone screaming at my commander saying, why is that girl here? And he said, well, I can't turn down a volunteer, and apparently her paperwork is stuck on someone's desk. And my commander held up the phone and said, get that girl in a uniform. And so the month later, I was sworn in, and the general who swore me in said, the only thing that would have been better is if you were African American, which is
so
insulting.
So it could kill two birds with one stone.
Yes, insulting, but I just smiled. You know, sometimes you have to just smile and say, damn you, I'm making a difference. I don't care what your words are, I'm fighting against them, and you won't even know it. And I became the most requested JAG.
Wow, okay. You earned the name Barracuda Aquilina, and I'm wondering, if you were a guy, would you have gotten the name Barracuda Aquilina, or would it have been, he's just a go-getter, he's awesome?
You're absolutely right. I would not have. I mean, they used to say, we're going to put you in high heel boots and all of these things. And then when I would cross-exam commanders and all of these people, and you would see grown men, knuckles turning white. And I would win my cases against the higher-ups. I got the nickname. A man would not have.
Yeah.
And, of course, I know other not so nice names, but I don't care, because even the generals would request me to represent them because I proved myself. And as women, we have to prove ourselves, but you can only prove yourself if you keep your power. Don't ever give it away.
Yeah.
And I choose never to give it away.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to go against the tide, and maybe I'll drown, but so far I have swum.
Okay, the Nassar case.
Yes.
Take us behind the scenes of how that kind of works. We saw it all unfold on air, but it had to come to your attention first.
The case was assigned randomly, and so I got it after it was the preliminary exam, and I got it, and it was random. And then we started the process. I didn't know a whole lot about him. I never had met him. I didn't know anything about him. I'm not someone who has the time to watch Olympics. I didn't know a whole lot about it. And so I prepared for a jury trial. They told me there were experts and that he certainly had a defense. And I thought, okay, my dad and brothers are doctors. Maybe there's something new. And so I proceeded to trial, always believing that he had a defense because I'm impartial. And I had
Justice is blind at that point.
Yes, and the girls hated me because I had to put a gag order because people were talking, and I needed to get a fair and impartial jury, so I put a gag order.
Which means that they could not talk about this anywhere.
Could not talk.
Yes.
And started the process. I ordered 800 jurors. 200 had already been sent out because we're going to do them in batches. And we had a special process because we had to find a clean jury.
Yeah.
As I was doing that, the attorneys asked me for a delay, and I said, no, I don't care. They said, well, he's going to be sentenced in federal court. I said, I don't care. No one messes with my docket. We're going. So the day before Thanksgiving, he decided to plead. And then his attorneys were supposed to question him and make the factual basis. They didn't go far enough. I continued and asked him if he had done this for his own sexual pleasure, and he hesitated, but he finally did admit to that. And then I set up the courtroom knowing that there were many girls who were going to testify, and I had said, because it's always been my practice for 15 years to let everybody, victim isn't defined by just the person who's injured. There's a rippling effect. The families, the parents, the children, whoever's involved with them is also injured. So I always let everybody talk. So I announced that everybody could talk, and at first we had about 30 or 40 who were going to talk. Yeah. And then the girls empowered each other.
Yeah. How therapeutic was that for those girls when you talked to them to be able to stand up and say, this was done to me, but does not define me?
It is absolutely necessary, and I made it so that he would be facing them so that they wouldn't, in the normal course, usually they come to the podium and they'll turn back if they're looking at defendant, which is not. You need to look at the eyes, the soul. Right. And so I had him sit next to me. It was also for his safety because I had a lot of safety things in place. But they came up to the podium and they were very small and a little gray and just unsure. And they said, Judge, can I address him first? Absolutely. And they would turn to him. And with each word, they got stronger and stronger and bigger and bolder.
And then a movement was created.
And then I talked to them and gave them, from something they said, I tried to inspire something in them. So now one of them just said, Judge Aquilina sort of challenged me to find my voice and sing again. So she wrote a song. Yeah. And so they were inspired, and they got 10 feet tall. And people said to me, how could you have done that for 156 girls? I listened to 169 overall because there were other people who testified. Mm-hmm. And let me just tell you, for those moms out there and for anybody who knows about childbirth, for me, when you go through the pain of labor and you're handed that baby, you forget the pain. I got a gift of 156 babies. They morphed into powerhouses, into warriors, and I felt them grow in that strength, and I was handed that new baby, and that gave me the power and the strength to listen to the next one. So I never felt tired. I didn't lose any sleep. They were the strength.
This is a movement that can't go away, and we've seen versions of it over the years, right? Yes. But the lesson to be learned here, there's always kind of a new twist on a lesson. And what was so crazy about this was that, you had parents oftentimes were in the doctor's office with him. And right. I think that's one of the things that he, the power that he had that he was getting off on.
He groomed everybody.
Yeah. And so the lesson to be learned here, and I think oftentimes we fall under the spell that if it's a professional or the person looks a certain way or they have a certain amount of money, that they would never do something like this. It's through all walks of society.
all walks, all looks, and the safest person might be the most dangerous person, and we have a right to informed consent. And babies, when they learn to speak, usually no is their first, or mom is their first word, and then dad, and they learn no very early. We all know that as kids, right? We can teach them about vagina and penis and use the right words, and to say, you have a right to know. If you don't like the doctor touching you or your teacher doing something, you have a right to say no and why and question. We need to have a new generation of questioning adults. We need to not teach them it's okay to sit on Santa's lap. If they're not comfortable, don't make them do it. It's okay to question your doctor.
So many times we'll talk to someone who's been sexually abused, and in the beginning they'll say, I knew something was not right. Innately, I knew something was not right, but I didn't feel like I could go ahead and say anything. And to your point of teaching kids early, and I remember my son came home from daycare one day and he just said, no, get out of my face, get away from my no-no place.
Yes.
Now, the thing is,
exactly.
that you also have to have conversation after that, because he wasn't quite sure why he was saying it. They were just taught that, right? And so he goes, okay, now what does that mean? So you have to have that conversation, age appropriate, of course, but to empower them. And I think that if you empower them at a young age, later on, that sticks with them. I know as a young girl, there was a case where a man in a truck tried to abduct me, and I got away. But I know that situation also stuck with me later on in life. For example, my first news director interview that I did, he looked at me and said, now you know how you can get this job? And I was like, by being good at what I do. And he said, no, this is what you're going to have to do. I busted out laughing and said, my daddy looks better than you. and he's much older than both of us. But a lot of times women don't have that confidence, and they're put in a position where they're looking at putting food on the table, and you want to empower them to say, now you can speak up and we will stand behind you.
We need to believe and not shame or blame, and not shut anybody out or shut anybody up. And we need to be careful how we're questioning, and that we're actually listening, hearing, and taking action. The ABCs need to be action, believe, change, not writing arithmetic, all those things, getting back to basics. It's really getting back to basics.
True basics.
We are humans, believe, take action.